Hello everyone and welcome to this Zoom into Soil webinar. I'm Danny Roach, the chair of the British Society of Soil Science Early Careers Committee, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our 7th webinar. So we're an established international membership organisation and charity committed to the study of soil in its widest aspects, and we bring together those working within academia and have a growing membership amongst practitioners implementing soil science in industry and those with a keen interest in soils. We plan to host 10 webinars during 2024, so do keep an eye out for our future webinars on the website. And just before we get started, a few basic housekeepings. As there's so many of you here today, all your microphones have been muted, and we'll be taking questions at the end of both presentations, and which we'll monitor these throughout the webinar. So if you could submit any questions you have by 10 to 1 to allow us to get through as many as we can before the end of the webinar. There's a raise your hand button, but we won't be using this unless the presenters specifically ask. And today's presentation has been awarded BASIS and EMERSO CBD points. So if you're registered with either body, please contact us directly after the event. And finally, please be aware that we are recording today's presentation. So I'd like to now introduce our first speaker, Lisa Donovan, a fellow Cranfield PhD student and BSQ Early Career member. Lisa's passionate about managing water resources in a sustainable way. She has an engineering degree in geosciences and hydrology, and she's completed her master's degree in advanced water management from Cranfield. Lisa is currently undertaking a PhD investigating the impact of minimum tillage and cover crops on soil erosion risk on farm and on river water quality in English surface water catchments. The Morgan-Morgan-Finney soil erosion model is applied, and she is also focused on improving the model's functionality. So over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you again, everyone, for joining this webinar. I will be talking to you about the work I've been doing for my PhD during the first year. And my PhD is entitled Improving the Functionality of a Soil Erosion Sediment Delivery Decision Support Tool and its Application to Priority Surface Water Catchments in England. My PhD is sponsored by water companies, Anglian Water, Severn Trent, and Southern Water. So, soil erosion from agricultural land is a natural hazard that is caused by multiple factors, including the presence of bare soil after harvest and the application of intensive tillage. And it causes damages both in the field and off-site in river water, including the reduction of crop yields and pollution to river water and the reduction of life of infrastructure and roads. However, for my PhD, I will be specifically focused on the impacts of soil erosion from agricultural land on raw river water quality for drinking water. Now, to address this problem, multiple stakeholders are involved. So the government with its policies, water companies, and land managers. On the government's side, they've continued to apply the European Water Framework Directive, and they have established the 25-year environment plan to encourage water companies to maintain and improve river water quality. And recently, they've also put in place the environmental land management schemes to incentivize land managers to apply sustainable and regenerative farming practices. And to support land managers, water companies also have certain schemes in place to encourage that soil and water quality conservation. So amongst this interaction, my PhD sits in the middle, and there's an opportunity for decision support tools to be used to both identify the areas of high erosion risk and to quantify to what extent mitigation options such as cover crops and minimum tillage can, well, to what extent those options can improve water quality for drinking water. There are, well, amongst the multiple soil erosion prediction models that exist, the modified Morgan-Morgan-Finney model has been chosen as it's the most adapted for my case. It's a semi-empirical model that calculates soil loss from climate, plant cover, and soil parameters. So its strengths are that this model uses detailed crop parameters, and it uses few but easily sourced parameters. So this is important if we want to incorporate the cover crops into the soil erosion modeling. And if this model is going to be used by water companies and land managers, for example. This model also calculates the soil erosion on a continuous temporal scale and a distributed spatial scale, which allows the application of geographic information systems. So this is important since the soil erosion risk isn't calculated on, well, based on the extreme rainfall events. And it allows me to do any spatial analysis of the input parameters of the model as well as the outputs of the model. Regardless of these different points, there are still elements to improve, such as the incorporation of parameters for catch crops, cover crops, minimum tillage. This model currently runs on an annual basis, so its temporal scale needs to be improved to look at the intra-annual variability of soil erosion risk. It is currently lacking the determination of sediment flow paths and discharge points, and it needs to be validated against water quality data. So the points I've just mentioned are actually the gaps in knowledge for my PhD. And so the aim of my project is to further develop and improve the functionality of this MMF model as a decision support tool for water companies and land managers to target management options to both reduce runoff and control soil erosion on farm in order to improve water quality downstream. And from this aim, 5 objectives have been defined, which are to measure the key cover crop, catch crop, and soil surface roughness parameters, to modify the temporal scale of the model, to include and optimize the connectivity module of the model. Yes, of the model, to evaluate the model's improvements, and finally to evaluate to what extent water quality data can be used to validate the model's outputs. Now, for my PhD, 6 priority surface water catchments have been chosen as a study area. So 2 catchments per water company management area. And these priority catchments were selected because the turbidity targets were not met by the water companies, and because river abstraction points are located within those catchments. But at the same time, the rivers in those catchments are designated as special sites of scientific interest, and those rivers are either partially or fully within drinking water protected areas. And finally, the soil textures of those catchments are vulnerable to soil erosion, and we can see that with the graph on the right. Those catchments are composed of mainly light and medium soils. Now, to identify the cover cropping windows, I first had to look at the main crop rotations that are within the priority surface water catchments, and this was done thanks to the Crop Map of England dataset. So with the 7 years of data I was able to access, I extracted the crop information within the study areas, and using a Python script reclassified the crop codes into the model's crop codes, and to calculate the 3-year crop rotations in the end, a Python script inspired by bioinformatics approaches was used. So this process was applied for all the priority catchments. And as a result, the most frequent 3-year crop rotations were shortlisted, and these crop rotations include 7 different cash crops, including sugar beet, potatoes, and maize, which are well known to generate high erosion risk. And I've plotted out on a calendar the crop growth and bare soil periods associated to these crop rotations. So we can observe from this calendar that there are 2 main bare soil periods. One is rather short, between July and October, which is an opportunity for catch crops, while another one is much longer, between July until March, April, which is an opportunity for cover crops. And so for the selection of the cover crop mixes that would address those bare soil periods, I discussed with different cover crop suppliers such as King's, Tiden and Sons, and Oakbank, as well as catchment advisors from the water companies, to decide on typical cover crop mixes land managers would use for that context. And in the end, 4 different mixes were chosen. So 2 winter mixes and 2 summer mixes that would also include the key cover crop species that are present amongst many other mixes farmers can find. And those species cover a wide range of the cover crop families. And finally, with those mixes selected, I will be conducting field trials and experiments on campus to try and grow those mixes and measure the parameters that will be used in the model later. So these parameters include the soil surface roughness, but also plant cover parameters that are that the model is sensitive to. For example, the canopy cover, ground cover, plant height, plant density, for example. And well, how will I be measuring them? That will be a mix between field measurements that are based on photographies, but also manually taking those measurements using a quadrat. And as for two of the parameters two of those parameters that influence the model less, I will be using literature values for those. And for the upcoming steps in my PhD, well, I will soon be starting the experiments to measure the cover crop and minimum tillage parameters. And this will be followed by the modification of the temporal resolution of the model, as well as the incorporation of the connectivity aspect into the model. And finally, I will end with the validation phase of the model. So I will be using water quality data and probably also remote sensing data sets for this step. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to acknowledge my supervisors, the catchment advisors from the water companies, the cover crop suppliers, and many other people who were able to support me during this first year of PhD. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was great. Just a reminder that we'll keep questions for both speakers at the end of the session. So feel free to add your questions as I've seen some of them come in, and we'll go through them at the end. Our next speaker is James Dowers, another early career committee member. James is a catchment management scientist at Severn Trent, and before this he was a soil scientist at ADAS. James completed a master's in crop improvement at the University of Nottingham in 2019. He's, as I said, an outgoing member now of the Early Careers Committee, and his current work involves supporting farmers and land managers to reduce their impact on the environment with a focus on water, which is achieved primarily by funding evidence-based schemes in priority catchments. So over to you, James.
Thank you very much. Right, yes, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Dowers, and I'm a catchment management scientist at Severn Trent. And as Danny said, I'm also on the Early Careers Committee for the British Society of Soil Science. But not for much longer, I'm due to be booted off any day now. And so for my swan song, I have been kindly invited to share with you what I do. Today I'm going to talk to you about what is catchment management, try to focus on some of the soily bits, and talk about why I think it's important. It's an important approach for creating benefits on farm and in the environment. But firstly, a little bit about Severn Trent. We are a water company based in the Midlands, and we extend into Wales a little bit there. You can see the white splodge on the map of the UK, which is the area that the company serves. Within that, we serve 4.6 million households and businesses, delivering 2 billion litres of drinking water every day and treating 3.2 billion litres of wastewater. So why are we interested in protecting water, and why am I interested in the catchment management point of view? There are two options when it comes to providing clean water. You've got your treatments, so filtration, blending, and this requires, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of engineering, a lot of investment. There's also the prevention approach, which is kind of catchment management, where we try to ensure that the water is as clean as it can be before it reaches the intake, so you kind of minimize the requirement for all the filtration and blending. In reality, obviously we use both of these approaches. Catchment management is a bit cheaper. They say that I've been told that for every £1 we spend in catchment management, we save between £2 and £20 in all this kind of technology filtration treatments. And I think there's more environmental benefit than filtration alone, because if you're managing the catchment, and you're trying to generate clean water before it even reaches the intake, then that has wider environmental benefits. If you invest only in treatment and filtration and you get loads of pesticides and nitrates, turbidity, coming in down the river. That's going to knacker the ecosystem before it gets to you. And you can clean it up and deliver it to customers, but then there's still loads of those associated negatives. So that's why I think catchment management is important. And why do we do this, or how do we do this? For the last 10 years, Severn Trent has run the Severn Trent Environmental Protection Scheme, or STEPS as we call it. And through STEPS, we work with farmers to understand and minimise their impact on the environment. This is achieved by offering grant funding. The scheme is entirely voluntary and is only available in priority catchments. Our priority catchments are typically surrounding an intake or borehole, which is where the water that ends up in consumers' taps is originally sourced. Our priority catchments are generally categorized based on the priority pollutant in the area. So we have three groupings. We have nitrate or nutrient priority catchments, we have pesticide priority catchments, and we have cryptosporidium priority catchments. The catchment can also be classified as a surface water or a groundwater catchment. And of course, we'd love to support all the farmers throughout the whole Severn Trent region, but it's just not feasible, which is why we have this targeted catchment management approach. Many farmers want to, help improve the environment, but often measures required can be costly with no clear benefit to business profits. If we want to eat, I think we have to accept that agriculture needs to exist and is in general a leaky endeavour. It's out there in the environment, you're putting inputs on, and some of it's going to end up as diffuse pollution. And I think farmers should be paid fairly for their efforts in minimising this. So this focused approach, which I'm going to talk you through, is more focused than some of the grant schemes you see like SFI. It allows us to target our funds specifically in areas where we think we'll see the biggest impact on water quality. And this is generally supported by our agricultural advisors in the area, which know the regions inside out and often have a personal relationship with the farmers. So we currently offer 47 water quality options, which farmers can apply to. And I'm going to try and highlight a few on the coming slides, focus on some of the soily ones today. The level of financing depends on the item, and some items we may not fund depending on what it tackles and the area it's in. So for example, we will only fund pesticide washdown areas in pesticide priority catchments. And our agricultural advisors go out to farm, they chat through what options might be best in that area, and they support farmers in delivering their applications. Behind the scenes, once we've issued an agreement, we have the impact modelled currently in FarmScoper, so we can understand exactly what we're achieving. FarmScoper is a decision support tool. Its development was initially funded by DEFRA, and it was developed by ADAS to model diffuse pollution. So it's pretty industry standard at this point. Most of the STEPS items we offer are within the mitigation methods user guide, and therefore are able to be modelled in FarmScoper. And it also means we can be confident that the items we're funding have a robust evidence base behind them. We're not overstating the benefits they provide, for instance. So one of the STEPS items that we fund is cover crops, and I want to talk through this one to kind of illustrate the points I'm trying to make. We know cover crops are really good for reducing nitrate leaching. That's well-established science, but ultimately the farmer cannot harvest them to make money, and they have costs associated with their establishment and management. So it makes it tricky to justify doing these without some support, I think. This is evidenced recently in this report that I was reading the other day, the nitrogen release from cover crops report, which was funded by our friends in the water industry at Portsmouth Water and Affinity Water, and it's an independent study that was delivered by ADAS. On the final, kind of in the conclusion wrap-up, the final page of the report, I think highlights really kind of what I'm trying to get at, which is, it says the study showed that it was more cost-effective to not grow a cover crop and destroy any weeds chemically, which is not what we want. We don't want extra chemicals going on the land or any more than is necessary. And the study also showed the importance of incentive schemes to support harder to monetize benefits. such as improved water quality. I think this demonstrates why targeted management-based approach can be successful, because it provides support for these items where they'll have the most impact. And on the screen on the left, I've put kind of our rates, what we pay cover crops at, and you'll see that there is a difference between groundwater catchments and surface water catchments. So we can fund them in surface water catchments, but we kind of appreciate that there will be more benefit in terms of reducing nitrate leaching in these groundwater catchments. So we pay them at a slightly higher rate there. And this is some examples of what we fund in the real world, providing, you know, real world benefits. On the left, there's an arable field, you know, it was winter barley, I think, and then on the right is one of the cover crop fields, same field, but cover crop that we funded. And here's another cover crop, kind of before and after. On the left, you can see the stubbles of some cereal production, and then on the right, there is a cover crop that has been well established. And I was looking at the mix for this one, and it includes, I think, interval kale, some stubble turnips, something other else, and some mustard. And then, you know, mustard has popped up in the literature as having one of the highest root length densities. So again, this is kind of an example of how the evidence-based supports kind of what we use to support what we want to do. And, you know, extensive living roots is one of the key principles of cover cropping and regenerative agriculture in the first place. So it's good to see that the mustard was in there, for instance. Some of the other items that we fund are, we fund this kind of farmer innovation grant, which offers farmers the ability to pitch something with up to £10,000 on offer. We see a lot of these applications coming in for GPS, actually, so GPS guided equipment, which shows farms are thinking carefully about the inputs they apply and applying them in the right place at the right rate. And we're all too happy to support that. It will also enable, you know, controlled traffic farming, which reduces the impact of soil compaction. We ask for before and after photos when we fund something like this to just try and ensure that it's not something that already exists or somebody else has already paid for. And another item that we fund is arable reversion, which is taking kind of the land out of arable production and putting it down to grass. It can be grazed, so it's still, you know, being farmed, if you like. And this is a picture from one of the applications that have come in from one of our farmers who has applied for this. It's in progress at the moment, so I don't have an after photo, but as soon as the grass is put down and we can see that it's well established, we'll be able to pay out. And you can see that kind of the soil erosion that was going on in this field. The farmer was trying to do everything right. The drilling has gone across the slope here, but the water has cut through it, and that's just like testament to the weather we had. It's probably a high risk field, so the farmers decided to apply for this arable reversion, which we currently fund at £326 per hectare per year. And we do specify that it has to be low input. So this grass field that's going to be established here will have lower inputs going on, and also hopefully reduce some of this runoff, some of this sediment loss in an area that is identified as high risk. And finally, a non kind of soily nutrient option, which I hope you'll allow me to talk about briefly, because it's one of our highest kind of value and highest impact items, which is the pesticide washdown area. These are dedicated spaces which are bunded, the floor slopes to a drain, which is not connected to the outside world, and kind of any drippings or washings or spillages are collected and put through a biofilter, which deactivates the pesticide before it can be diluted and spread. So if a farmer was filling up without one of these areas and spilled by accident the chemical and it trickled down into a drain, it ends up straight into a watercourse. So this is kind of what this prevents, and we only, because these are so expensive, we only fund these in the pesticide priority catchments. So I've spoken a lot about kind of what we do, what we fund, but I know there's a lot of scientists on the call, and they'll be saying, okay, you model the impact, but do you actually see it happening in the real the real world. So I'd like to introduce you to the Bourne and Blythe catchment, which sits between Birmingham and Coventry. There is a Severn Trent intake on each river. And I did look up some soil information before the call about this catchment. The Blythe intake, I think it is, sits on an alluvium, I can't really say that word, alluvium band, which perhaps unsurprising, there's the rivers that are running through this catchment is a surface water catchment. There are some glacial sands and gravels that extend throughout the catchment, but obviously, you know, working over an area of this size, there is going to be some variability in terms of soil type and also the kind of risk areas when you start to look at relief and slopes and that sort of thing. Over the past 5 years, we've delivered just shy of £200,000 worth of funding. This includes, you know, 6 margin grants. So that's 6 separate grants, not just 6 margins, but a farmer might put in a multiple amount of margins under one grant. And this will be protecting, you know, lengths of ditches and streams to capture runoff. We've got 6 cover crop grants in specific areas covering 360 hectares, and then 9 grants for precision equipment, such as the GPS that I spoke about earlier. And you can see that over those over the last few years, we've certainly seen a downward trend, even to the point where it's now, you know, below the nitrate drinking water standard of 50 milligrams per litre. So and what I should say is these are samples that are taken from the river every month. We have 7 sampling points in this catchment, and each data point you see here is the maximum from any one of those points on the sampling date. So these are maximum levels you're seeing, and we do see a downward trend. Now, obviously, we can't say we contributed entirely to this. We hope that we had a small part to play. In the midst of that, there was, you know, a fertilizer price crisis, which kind of focused the mind on how much should be going on. You know, people are becoming more interested in regen farming with our support or not. But it's good to see the impact in the real world. And one more catchment I'd like to talk to you about is the Hilton catchment, which is just to the west of Wolverhampton. This is a groundwater catchment and is a nutrient priority. This groundwater catchment is groundwater catchments in general are much smaller, which means you have limited opportunity, but you can look at things in a bit of fine detail. So we've been able to talk to more or less all the farms in this region. We've essentially mapped what's going on and where to try and understand the opportunity we have in approaching people, offering them some funding. The soils here are predominantly loamy and sandy. There's a kind of a high to moderate leaching potential, but groundwater does move a bit slower than surface water, and it can be more difficult to see the impacts because the groundwater could still be exhibiting some older signatures. Nevertheless, we fund practice in this. We fund changes in practice in this area with a similar amount of money gone into a much smaller area, to be fair, with 9 cover crop grant applications covering 130 hectares, 5 precision equipment grants covering 780 hectares. Not all of that hectareage is within this catchment because some farms will have fields inside and some out, but that's kind of the total area that precision equipment is going to be used on. And that includes, you know, GPS, variable rate nitrogen, that sort of thing. And then somewhere in there is an arable reversion, so one of those arable fields has become grassland. That's an 8.3 hectare field, and kind of all these things start to add up. And then the graph at the bottom, what you're looking at there is sampling for nitrate at the borehole as it comes out of the ground before any treatment or blending or whatever. And over the 20 years ago, maybe further, there was like the beginnings of a worrying increase. And within the last 5 years, after we've kind of gone out and started to fund these evidence-based, you know, things that we know will make a difference, we start to see a downward trend, which I hope is going to continue. So I've tried to talk about what we do now, which is, you know, we rely on a robust evidence base. We are only interested in funding things which we believe are, you know, been proved to work. But also, you know, we look forwards, and it was great to see Lisa's presentation just now. Severn Trent are supporting that. I'm not involved directly, but it just shows that you know, we're interested in building that evidence base as well and supporting scientists in doing so. As we look forward into the future, new catchments and risks are always being identified. Previously, we focused a lot on nitrate. Looking forward, it looks like we're going to have a closer look at phosphorus in some areas. We've also primarily focused on reducing losses from farms, so putting that field down to arable reversion to stop the soil being washed off it, putting in margins to stop anything being washed off that way. We're also considering putting additional focus on supporting a reduction in inputs in specifically risky areas. Not necessarily a reduction in, you know, down to zero, but a sensible reduction down to, you know, where the right amount is going on at the right time, essentially, and we want to support that further. And in doing that, new steps items are being considered all the time, but like I say, we are only prepared to fund things that we know have the science behind them. And of course, we're keeping tabs on the funding landscape and how it develops. SFI obviously supports farmers from every corner of the country, but we only work with farmers in specific priority catchments. So how can we complement the different streams of funding they have available to them? So that is the end of my presentation. I appreciate I rattled through it quite quickly. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, James. That was great. So yeah, as James says, we'll move to the Q&A session now, led by our other early career committee member, Jess Brooks. So continue sending in your questions, but Jess will start on the ones that have already been sent in now. Thank you, Jess.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Thank you both for your presentations there. First question here is for James, and it is, how is the Farmer Innovation Fund distributed, and what do you look for, especially in applications?
Yeah, so it's distributed kind of, farmers in priority catchments will apply for it and they will say what they want to do, and we will kind of have a chat within the team to say, do we think this thing, and we'll also kind of look at what we can compare it to in FarmScope to see if we can model a benefit. And then if we decide, yeah, this is going to have a benefit in this context, we'll also talk to the agricultural advisor in that area. They will have a better idea of what's going to happen in terms of changing practice. And once we decide that, yeah, that's going to go ahead, we can issue an agreement. And I think, was that the long and short of the question? Was there enough of it?
Yeah, is there anything you look for in particular in applications, like especially in the applications?
Yeah, especially we'll kind of look at the area that it's being applied to. So if someone comes and asks for a GPS, but they only farm, you know, a handful of hectares, it's not going to be great value for money. So that's one of the key things that we look for when we're looking at farmer innovation. Yeah, kind of the breadth of effect that it's going to have.
Cool. Next one is for Lisa. It starts with a little bit of a statement and then I'll come to the question. So it's saying here, soil management is directly influencing soil erosion risks. For example, a min-till on sandy soil has the potential to compact the soil and increase the risks of erosion and runoff to the watercourses. But a no-till management on clay soil can increase the risk of compaction too. Is the model taking into consideration the soil type and water and moisture content?
Yeah, so very good point about how these practices can have different effects on the soil textures. So the model does include the different soil textures and the soil moisture content as well. So the soil moisture content, yeah, so in the model, it's actually the one at field capacity. And in terms, well, I think it's later on with the results of the model that is where I will be interpreting, like based on the model results, the soil erosion risk that is calculated. That is where I will be able to add this aspect of like, okay, well, certain practices seem to affect the soil erosion risk, but in reality, on a farming point of view, it isn't realistic actually. But yeah, a good point.
That's good. Thank you, Lisa. Back to James. Are you aware of other water authorities with similar programs to STEPS?
Yes, I'm pretty certain there are plenty of other water companies that offer kind of a grant funding scheme. I don't know if it's managed in exactly the same way, but yeah, if the question has been asked by a farmer who's seeing if they can get some funding to improve on-farm practices, then I would suggest kind of contacting the local water company and asking if they have any agricultural advisors, and starting from there, because I know that there are certainly other grant funding schemes.
I don't think we got to this one, so another one for James. Can farmers receive step payments on top of sustainable farming incentive payments for the same option or action, for example, winter cover crops?
At present, yes, we've spoken to DEFRA quite a lot about this, and we think they can. It's not something we've kind of actively promoted yet, and I don't know if there's any agreements that exist that are accessing both. At the end of the day, we can't check who's got SFI. I don't think SFI can check who's applied to STEPS. So I understand that there's kind of like a double funding question going on. So, but we've spoken to DEFRA, and we're confident there won't be any sanctions to farmers that have applied to them and then apply to us. But these things change all the time. And I'm not aware of any kind of current application, so it's under review, I guess.
Thanks, James. And another one for you about, do you have catchment advisors who advise farms of correct soil management or tailored advice based on their soil type and series?
Our agricultural advisors can certainly do that, and we can also fund specialist on-farm advice, where we get independent people kind of come in under a contract and produce a report and say this is what you should do, and then oftentimes those recommendations you can translate into a STEPS application. But yeah, certainly agricultural advisors can make such recommendations. Yeah.
And another one, following on from that, are the applications open to applicants across seas? So somebody asked about from Africa.
Afraid not. It's only if you are in the Severn Trent region in the UK.
And sorry, James, another one for you. Will we fund improvements in biodiversity KPIs?
Do we fund improvements in biodiversity?
Yeah.
We do, yeah. There is a kind of a biodiversity steps, which is separate to this, and I didn't want to go into it loads because I wanted to try and focus on our soily options. But yeah, there is a biodiversity options available, which includes stuff like feeding farmland birds, mini meadows, flowering strips, this sort of thing. Yeah.
Fab, thank you. And one from myself and Lisa, if I may. You were speaking about your field data, your next steps of your field data. Will you be collecting these at each of your priority sites?
Yes, so the idea at this point is ideally it would be to to take those measurements within the different priority catchments. So I'm actually currently contacting farmers to see if they're available for collaboration for these field trials. But so depending on the farmers who respond, and in terms of logistics and transport, maybe I'll be able to do those measurements within the priority catchments. That would be ideal. Or I will focus on farms where they at least cover the crop rotations I'm interested in, and the soil types.
Thank you. Another question's come in. So what are the influences and relations of diffuse pollution on water quality parameters and toxic elements in suspended sediments in a river, especially in agricultural catchments? Perhaps one for James.
What was that? What was the influence?
Yeah, influence or relations.
What is the influence and relations of these things on water quality in priority catchments?
And toxic elements in suspended sediments in a river, especially in agricultural catchments.
Right, yeah, so, well, it's kind of a big question. What's the influence? Not quite sure how to phrase my answer, but our intakes, whether that be a borehole or a surface water intake, abstracting from a river, we will always monitor kind of what's going on. And if there is what's called an exceedant, so one of these things is higher than we would like, that will kind of trigger all sorts of alarm bells, and then we'll go and do an investigation and try and do some extra sampling, try and narrow down where it's coming from, and work with the landowners. If we already know them, ring them up. If we don't, try and make contact and say we've noticed this is going on, we think it might be to do with this. And then if you can identify the source entirely, we can, and they're in a priority catchment, so eligible for funding, we can direct them to, you can change this and we'll pay you to do it. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And there's another one that came in that perhaps you've answered mostly to as well. It was about mitigations of nutrients and pesticides, in particular reducing cryptosporidium risks. I'm not sure if that's too specific for you.
We certainly, so we have 3 priority catchment types: nutrients, pesticides, and cryptosporidium. Nutrient, and the steps handbook, which you can see on the website, kind of says what we'll fund in each priority catchment or what we prefer to fund. Obviously, in the nutrient kind of priorities, it's cover crops, arable reversion, some GPS for variable rate, some margins. Margins are also great for pesticide reduction, and we'll do a pesticide washdown area as well. We fund those. And then when it comes to cryptosporidium, we think the biggest source is kind of from, well, a big source, I think, according to FarmScope, is animals making their way into the watercourses. So we'll fund fencing in those catchments and troughs, so that farms can still, get water to their animals without them traipsing into the river, causing poaching and defecating into the watercourse.
Thank you. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions. No more have come in, so we'll pause there then. Thank you so much to both of you and Jess for keeping an eye on the questions. There's one more question that I think we can get in from Mars to say some of these solutions are already written in. More of a comment, I suppose. Some of these solutions are already written in the farming rules for water. So yeah, thank you all so much for submitting your questions. And on behalf of the British Society of Soil Science, and especially our early career members who have contributed today, I'd like to express my thank you. And thank you all for attending. You'll find a quick feedback survey when you leave the webinar, which we hope you'll take the time to complete. And the recording of this webinar will be available after the event on our YouTube channel. I want to take this time just to remind you of our upcoming annual conference, which will be taking place in Cardiff in December. The theme is Sustainable Soils for People and Planet. Tickets are on sale now, and submissions for abstracts is also open. So it'd be fantastic to see you all get involved. Our next Zoom into Soils webinar is scheduled to be on Wednesday, 14th of August, from 4 till 5 p.m. on international governance of soils. So keep an eye out on our website for how to register for that one. We hope to see you at future events. And in the meantime, thank you all so much, and especially to our speakers.